we don't have a presentation for you to look at. I can say now that it was absolutely fantastic. Had some really good graphics on there. Looked great. So I wanted to start by talking about when we first started Smarter. Our business model was traditional. We were going to sell stock via distributors to retailers. The USP that we had was that our products could be connected to apps and allow people to control those products directly. I remember the feeling of relief when we shipped our first lot of stock, and it was a moment of passing the buck. We've done it. We've made hardware. It's with our distributors and will now be sold. Imagine our surprise then when all of those customers had bought the product, taken them home, connected them to their app. They're now our customers again. We needed to provide service and support to those customers, but it also meant we had a channel to communicate with them directly and also sell services and further features. That was the real starting point, I think, for our business and for our platform. In that time, I've also witnessed a shift in the appliance industry as a whole. Job titles that include digitalization and innovation are more commonplace. We've got labs and incubators in large corporates, and there's a much more open approach to partnering with small businesses like ours. There's been a marked reduction in the need to own and control everything within that entire system, and that's the environment we need to be able to provide services and thrive in the smart kitchen. Data can be seen as quite a scary word at the moment, I think. We all trade our data with businesses every day in exchange for services, going on Facebook when you're bored on the train or getting an Uber to a meeting. In the smart kitchen, we're in people's homes. We're not just in people's homes, we're in the most important room of that home, the room that people spend the most money on, the room that people spend the most time in. This is why the digital services that we provide have to be making a noticeable improvement to the customer's day-to-day life. True value needs to be at the core of the services that we're providing. We've marketed and sold that product, so in my opinion at that point, we've done the hard bit. We've made it, we've marketed it, we've sold it. We're now in a position to support our customers in using that product in their homes. Once an equal balance of data for service has been established, customers are happy to exchange their data. So we know that an equal exchange has to take place. For the business providing a digital service, you're creating revenue streams with low maintenance and high margins, which I think anybody that makes hardware will really appreciate. Having a connection with that customer means that you can increase that lifetime value with a reoccurring revenue. We have opportunities like cutting down on supply chain logistics, reducing waste, and even having the chance to make healthy food and food education cheap and accessible. As a customer, you have the chance to benefit from services that will make your cooking better. You can whip up a healthy, tasty meal from the remnants of a near-empty fridge and use more than one feature on your oven. No longer will you just plug in your fridge and leave it there for 10 years. The opportunity for digital services in the smart kitchen are plentiful. One of the topics that comes up frequently in our industry is the concept of a managed fridge. The possibility that us as service providers know for the next week how many people will be eating, what things on what days in which household. We know when they will need which appliances, ingredients and recipes on which day. Produce with expiry dates to match that schedule can be delivered and replenished just in time and as required, all of which is managed in the background with customers supported throughout. At this event, we have all of the people and expertise required to make the managed fridge happen. The interest in the reduction of food waste, living healthier lives, and the reality of people having less and less time shows how incredibly useful this service could be. To make the managed fridge a reality, or make any digital service a reality in the smart kitchen, we require a network between food manufacturers, food retailers, logistics providers, appliance manufacturers, and platforms like ours. The industries of food manufacturing and retailing, cooking and storage within the kitchen have always been running in parallel since I've been in the industry. The advent of the smart kitchen and the services that the customers want mean that we will all need to work across all of the areas to provide meaningful and, most importantly, commercially successful offerings. The most successful businesses that have created a digital service are those that have leaned on existing tech and innovation. They've partnered with experts in the fields that they're not experts in, and they've provided services that have enhanced their existing product lines. Although frightening at the time, having all of those customers in direct contact with us from the start has allowed us to grow at the pace and in the direction that we have. Having that connection with the customer is incredibly important and rewarding in this new era. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Come on over and take your mic with you. How do you do that as a startup? How do you sort of build a customer base that trusts you and feels like they can, they're okay downloading that app because they feel like you are, you're good. They're not going to do anything to their data.
Dodgy. So I
right,
think
dodgy.
For us, building a brand has been a slow process. I think having that direct communication that I spoke about with customers, they're talking directly to us. Right. So that instinctively builds trust. They're not buying products off of somebody that they never speak to again. I think that ongoing communication really helps. And really, it's what you're doing with that data. If you're asking people for data and not giving them a service back in return, that is a concern for people. You're just collecting and mining people's information. If you're saying to them, let me know what butter you use and I'll make sure that you never run out of butter, that's acceptable and understandable, and people are happy to do that.
Right. The managed fridge concept, I think, is interesting because on the one hand, when you start to say, we'll know everything that people are eating every night, every ingredient, you start to get a little bit like, oh, you could see how people would think that was weird. And then I started to think, or you could solve the global food crisis, because then you would know on such a micro level where people were getting food, where the food was still needed to go. You know what I mean? So on a waste level. So you're talking about individual fridges potentially changing long-term global food supply issues?
I would love something we were doing to contribute to something so important.
Yeah.
That would be the dream. I think the way we've felt about it and the way we thought about it was very much around even supermarkets with families.
Right.
Everybody instinctively, when they're at the supermarket, will go and look for the latest date of a product which is giving them the most opportunity to use that produce in a period of time. What we can do with the managed fridge is that if you're cooking bolognese on Monday, you get mince that will last till that Monday. If you're cooking it on the Friday, you get it on the Friday. That's what that small change would make such a huge difference to food waste and the amount of food supermarkets are throwing away.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably every single person in here has that sinking feeling of having to throw produce that's gone bad because you haven't cooked it yet or you haven't gotten to it yet. The concept of building this network, so when you're talking about kind of putting a call out to everyone who's at this conference, we have to do a better job of building a network and not working in parallel. So whether we're retailers or food manufacturers or appliance makers, who in that network, not brand, but who out of those groups has been fastest to the table to build this network, and who do you feel like still needs the education to kind of get there in terms of those groups?
In our experience in the UK, food retailers are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else. They're looking at ways technology can improve the way that they manage their shops. They're looking at ways that technology can connect them with their customers, and they seem to be much more open and much more technologically advanced than other areas. I think hardware businesses, the people that are making the appliances, naturally are slower to the table because there's much more that needs to change. When you're used to doing something as narrow as manufacturing product, to move away from that is very uncomfortable, even if the opportunity can be huge. Right. But they are, again, even in the time we've been around, there's been huge movements in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you get, when you sit down in business conversations or whatnot, do you get the question like, how are we... the Amazon question, right? Like, how are we all going to fight Amazon?
Yeah.
Who's literally going into every crevice of every part of that network and more, right?
Yeah, I get that question pretty much every business meeting that I do with appliance manufacturers and brands. Amazon are a real threat because they move fast. They are good at what they do. But we're better. And the thing that I will always say in response is being open and working with experts in each field. You don't need to, as a large company, you don't need to know it all. You don't need to own it all. Being able to work with startups, work with development teams and other things,
It seems like that actually has been a value and that surprisingly some of these older industries have actually done a good job embracing, where startups, maybe interacting with startups was a little bit of a tricky concept in the past, but the reality of there are these bigger companies that are moving very quickly, and in order to keep up with the Amazons of the world, we need to make sure that we're embracing innovation, we're bringing other folks in, we're adding that type of expertise to our network or team without having to build it ourselves in-house, which might take a lot longer.
Yeah.
So I think that's super interesting. I am really excited to invite Ramona on stage, Ramona Wehlig from Thermomix. Welcome. We're going to chat with her about the Thermomix model and talk a little bit more about on the hardware software side. I think you have a mic right there. Yes, perfect. Welcome. So I would love for you to just give kind of a brief just overview of kind of the work you do, and of course everyone in the room knows who Thermomix is, but with your sort of thoughts on the topics that we're talking about, so on digital services, and Thermomix being a brand that's been around, a legacy brand for a long time. If you haven't gone upstairs to their table, they have sort of the museum of Thermomixes throughout the years, which I personally found fascinating when you guys were setting up. So just talk a little bit about sort of the evolution of that model.
Now you can hear me?
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. So we are manufacturing Thermomix since 50 years, so we have quite a long heritage. So it's not like a new company being like 2 years old, so it's 50 years. And as you said, you can see our history at our booth. Now, what is important when it comes to services? One thing you need to understand about Thermomix is, and this is also talking about business models, is the only way that we can grow is through people that love the product and do recommend that. So we don't do huge marketing. We do not operate like most of other companies. So the only way we grow is to see that people love the product, use the product, and recommend it. So what we did after quite a while, so after 50 years of history, so I think like 15 years ago, is we started to do research and understand how could we even unleash more growth potential to our business model. How could we make people recommend even more the product? And what we did is we started to understand why actually do people recommend and what could we do to boost it. So what we figured out, and it may sound obvious to you, is the more people use the product, the more they recommend. So what differentiates a promoter from a detractor is the usage level. So we were deep diving on that and understanding, so what could we do to boost the usage? And this is when we started to build a huge ecosystem of services, from cooking classes to consultants going back to the customer after the purchase, introing to the product, helping with the onboarding, supporting the full usage. Now, this is what we did for a couple of years, and I think what should be most relevant to you as an audience is what's actually the relationship with a smart kitchen. So this is what we did in 2015, 2016. We launched our new product generation, a connected product generation, so embarking us on the journey into the smart kitchen. Now, and what was the true service aspect of that was that besides the Thermomix, we have launched a platform called Cookie-Do. In the first place, featuring guided cooking recipes that you could use on your Thermomix, but not only that. So what we did for the very first time is not only support our customers with the cooking process itself, but also supporting our customers before and also after the cooking journey. So when you start like, what am I cooking today, to help you with tons of inspiration, with recommendations and all of that, help you to compile your shopping list, to do your weekly planning, but also right after the cooking, getting all your favorites in one place and carrying it around in one pocket. So that's a key service that we did. And talking about business model and also talking a little bit about facts and figures. So as of now, I said we started 2015, 2016 with connected devices. We have nowadays more than 3 million connected Thermomixes out there in the world, which we think is amazing. Secondly, talking about business models, when customers access our Cookie Do platform and enjoy the service that we are offering, we usually manage to convert 50% of those people having a connected Thermomix into a subscription model. So this is the way how you access the recipes and the services right afterwards. And I mean, we just have been also talking about data. That's, I mean, for us, the next key thing is, besides complementing the recipe journey, and I think this is also what you were talking about, with additional services that not we necessarily have to provide, but connect with you guys, is also that those services that we provide on Cookie Do, to personalize them even more. I mean, this is what we heard, I think, today in almost every presentation. And this thanks to data, because customers are different. There is people that love to cook, people that cannot cook. I mean, we heard all of that. So for us, the key next step is to drill down into that data and personalize our services that we provide on Cookie Do, but also on the TM6.
Excellent. So I think, the Thermomix model, talking about business models, is really interesting because you don't necessarily approach traditional marketing and sales and all of that. And that has created this sort of almost cult-like love of the product and this amazing community, sort of army of evangelists. How did you determine, when you built the connected product, how did you determine, did you use existing data on customers, which obviously you weren't getting necessarily from a connected product, but just from sort of traditional ways, and sort of thinking about what that connectivity looked like? I think one thing that's interesting is everybody's journey to the connected space has been a little different, and I think in some cases there was a lot of criticism in the beginning of like, well, everybody built, they stuck the internet in their device, they put an app, and then that was yay, Smart Kitchen. And we had a lot of conversations about that 5 years ago. So just curious, like, how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is what we're going to serve in this first iteration? And then how did you learn from that as you built the services?
Sure. So connectivity was for us clearly in the second place. So we did a lot of research, like when we started with a new product generation, and there's one thing that we figured out: to boost the usage, our customers need recipes and recipes and recipes. So we were testing and designing, so how could we bring those recipes closer to the customer, but also closer to the Thermomix itself? So this is when we were looking into customer behavior and seeing what they were doing. And at those time, I mean, we started like 2010 we started. So we saw that people first brought, like tablets to their kitchens, and they were looking online for recipes. So we were starting to prototype. So how could that feel like if recipes come closer? So would we show just an app with some recipes, or how deeply could we actually integrate the recipe experience together with the product? And that's what we did. So we started prototyping on bringing the recipes onto the device, guiding people through the recipes there. And that's the way we did it. And then for sure it had to be connected. And also with regards to connectivity, we took two major steps. So at the beginning, and this is also what you see up there, we started the connectivity rather in a shy way. So you could pick and choose. So you had two versions of Thermomix, one with a chip where you had guided cooking recipes on, and one with a cookie that immediately connected you. And you will also see upstairs that we learned during this process that actually 98% of our customers are choosing the connected thing right from the very beginning. And this is, we decided for the TM6, we built the Wi-Fi in, we built Cookie Do in, it's all fully integrated, so we don't need to make them decide whether they like to be connected at all, because it's not about connectivity, it's about enjoying the full potential of recipes and of Cookie Do.
What's driving that 50%? So 50% will go into a subscription model from Cookie Do and from kind of that guided cooking. What do you think is helping people convert there, and what do you think is preventing the other 50% from converting?
So I think first of all, it's again all about recipes. So we spend quite a huge amount into our recipe development. So we are based in 34 countries, meaning we have in all the countries local recipe development. So the recipes are, in guided cooking, but it's also about, catching you where you are with your local food traditions and making sure you know that it's something really relevant to you. So I think one core thing is recipes that make you use the product. The second thing is great and smart functionality that you find in there. For creating your shopping list. We are also prototyping on ingredient delivery, stuff like that. Then that you can manage all your recipes in one place. So usually what we figure out, so those 50% that are not in, that they end up saying, well, I have not really used it. And this is where we leverage on our great potential of our consultants, making sure that after purchase, they go back to the customer, trying to understand how can we help you to make most out of your Thermomix experience. And that's something we also need to leverage much more digitally.
So for both of you, I'm curious, because and this kind of came up in a couple of panels today, a lot of the criticism, or some of the criticism, can often be that we're building sort of islands, ecosystems, right? So certain, you're building an ecosystem here, and you're building communities there, and then in the kitchen we've got all these devices, but not necessarily one sort of consistent experience or one consistent, and that doesn't necessarily mean one platform, but one way that everything is sort of either working together in the background. I think we're getting there, but I don't think we're quite close yet. So I'd love to hear kind of each of you talk a little bit about, like, what is Smarter's role in that? Where do you see sort of the future of, being able to contribute to, again, not one platform, but one experience where you might be, in one part of the kitchen, and Thermomix might be in one part of the kitchen, but there's sort of that holistic, and then same thing to you as well.
So for us, I think the value that we can share back with companies like Thermomix or other appliances is giving them access to people's fridges, obviously sharing the information of what people are having, what ingredients they have. And I think that is what it comes back to, is businesses understanding their strengths, not trying to do it all, and being in a position where we can trade information, support with customers, the same customers, because they will be the same customers that we hope that customers that have Thermomixes will also have fridge cams, and being able to build those relationships in a non-time consuming way, essentially, without having to integrate each other's businesses, but just have a simple way of sharing and trading that information. I think if we can get to that point, the usefulness of the smart kitchen will skyrocket.
And I just had that experience like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we also had a cooking session in our team, and we were using like different devices and different apps. And I have to say, experiencing it from a user perspective, it was completely stressful. I was completely lost. I did not know where to look at. There's the app like this, there's the interface like that. So I think those places like we have it here, like at the Smart Kitchen Summit, are a great place to talk and to connect, because I do believe that we can all coexist. We have different strengths and profiles, and we need to complement each other to work on that user experience, because I think, honestly, me as a user looking into the Smart Kitchen, I'm really happy to look for all those convenience aspects, but just experiencing it, how it's nowadays with those different devices, talking with different apps, there's still some road to go. So I think that's what we should do, like talk and join forces. And as you said, and this is also true for Thermomix, now we have done our first learnings in the Smart Kitchen, and now it's about, like, you did your own learnings, talk to others, share forces, and create something bigger than that.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think if there's takeaways from the conference, I think one should be sort of thinking globally and at the same time locally, right? So you're thinking about your product, you're thinking about your solution, you've got your head down trying to create a great experience for your customers, but also making sure to look up and see, what does the rest of the kitchen space look like, from design to other appliances to the platforms itself to the ways that things are evolving and changing, because we are definitely, and you've seen this in the smart home, there's definitely been moves to kind of create sort of universal ways for smart homes to coexist. But in a lot of cases, one of the ways that's happening is through Amazon and Google, right? They emerged sort of with voice control as this as something that people really glommed on too quickly, and they're credited for sort of moving it forward. But that doesn't mean the rest of the players in the market don't still need to continue to think and work to, own and have those customers appreciate their experience and work together. So it's not like, well, everything works great except for these two things over here, which I still have to go into my individual app and change it and do this and do that. And so I think the kitchen is in danger of going in that direction if we don't sort of continually look up and think globally. So I think that's a really important kind of piece. One other thing I'm curious about is sort of how you think about, you touched a little bit on it in terms of like global, like Thermomix is global. I know you all are in the UK. How do you think about what it would look like to move? How are markets different? You said UK food retailers are sort of first to the table. Yep. I think the US market is different than that. I think food retailers are often not. Some of them are and some of them aren't. So just curious your thoughts on sort of different markets.
It's difficult, and it's something that startups will find especially difficult. Yeah. You're often in a much better position to do a good job in your own market. Understanding the shopping is a great example of that. In the UK, very few people do their big weekly shops physically in store. Everybody's doing it online, and then we use convenience stores to top up our shopping during the week. That is very different, I understand, in the US. The cost of healthy food to buy from supermarkets to make is much more than eating at restaurants, for example. There are a lot of cultural differences each country you move into. As a small business, it's quite hard to keep up with those. I think it's why we've got to be so open, so that we can move into different countries and different territories with the support and network of other businesses and their understandings.
Yeah, sort of like find companies that can sort of be your Sherpas in those countries. And exactly. I think that's super smart. How do you spoke about the recipes, but you almost think really intentionally when you go into 34 different countries to build a cooking experience, because cooking is so personal and different. And then you add technology on top of that, which technology is also used differently, considered differently, adopted differently, which is kind of like a big layer of complexity to global adoption. That's an understatement of the year. So what are some of the elements that you do as you're thinking about building services for kind of a global space?
So, what we do, since, it's all so different, is, we usually start piloting something somewhere and see where we could get it going. For ingredient delivery, this is what you were touching about. For example, we started piloting in Germany, and it's not like really hitting off the ground. So it's great for a marketing message, but in Germany it's not that advanced like in the UK, for example. So now we have the discussion again in the US to pilot that. So what we try to do is we always try to see the common ground, but also dedicate time to figure out, so what is stuff that we could start and get going in the US, in certain European countries, just making sure that we learn and iterate and improve and then roll it out globally. But needless to say, and this is also what comes, all the heritage also comes with a burden. Usually if you start doing something in one country, the other country is already up and saying like, I also would like to have it. And it's like, yeah, we get it going. Yeah, but it's a tough job to do. We also enjoy it a lot, but yeah, we try as much as we can to pilot as early as possible.
Yeah, that's super important. So as we kind of close up soon and let these folks go to happy hour, I'd love to just hear sort of final thoughts. If you had someone in front of you who was, I think in your case, a newer startup coming to the space, and in your case, maybe a newer startup in appliance hardware and building a cooking appliance, what would be, and they wanted, they were looking at digitizing, they wanted to sort of get to that next level. What's your best advice? What should they be thinking about? What should they make sure that they leave SKS with if they're here? Or just be thinking about in their future?
My gut reaction would always be, don't do hardware. It's just so hard. That's not the positive message that I want to be giving across to people. I think it's about, we're naturally, partly because we're English and partly because we're especially bad, we're naturally quite antisocial. And the biggest sort of surge for us has definitely been since we've started networking and doing these events and talking to other businesses and understanding the constraints that they have. I think, to meet people within the industry and really understand who your appliance is going to be sat next to, and what the markets are, I think would be really important.
And sort of make sure you're educating yourself and understanding the full network, the full market.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I would not necessarily say don't do hardware. So I think the combination of both is actually great. But I mean, in terms of speed, in terms of like progressing learning, absolutely can follow what you just said. For me, my best advice would be always focus at the customer and be close to the customer. So don't start with having a product idea and just get it going, but look at the people that you would like to serve. What do they actually need? What gaps do they feel within the cooking process, within the process before and right after, and create something, test it, prototype it, and then just do it again. I mean, this is the way how we did it and how I felt like we could create something that is really matching consumer needs. And to me, that would be, I mean, it sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah.
Yeah, it does sound simple and intuitive, but it often, if you look at past iteration of products, particularly in the space, you can see the opposite, where you might have said, this is really cool. Who did you build this for? Who is going to use this? And then you sort of get like I think people who are really into X, Y, and Z, but that's not really a type of person. That's just the person that in your head. And I think if you are sort of obsessing about that, these are our customers, this is who we care about. And you hear a lot more of that now. I talk to a lot more sharps now who sort of know at a much deeper level. So I think that's really good advice. Thank you, ladies, both for joining us. Thank you all for sticking around through the end of the session. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Wolf, who's running up the stage, to give us final closing thoughts. Thank you, ladies.